Ladies and gentlemen, we need to take a motion to come out of non-public. We were in a session upstairs, so just bear with us a moment. Accept roll call vote coming out of non-public.
I, Joe Green.
I, Deb Paul.
I, Jim Butler.
I, John Farrell.
I'd like to make a motion to seal the minutes indefinitely.
Second.
Roll call vote.
I, Joe Green.
I, Deb Paul.
I, Jim Butler.
I, John Farrell. Minutes are sealed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Londonderry Town Council meeting. Today is June 20th, and we are here at 7 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to go through all these exciting times here in the United States, let's really sit and pray for our first responders who do what they have to do to protect the people of this country when in some of the hardest times we've had over the last couple of years. Thank you. Let's see what we got here. So, ladies and gentlemen, the council opens with public comment. Is there anyone who would like to address the council this evening? Under public comment. Yes? Name and address, please.
Good evening. Ann Champa, 28 Wedgewood Drive. I just noticed that the tree that was shading my car every time I come to these meetings, or later on in the afternoon or early evening, is gone. What happened to it? Was it diseased or something like that?
Mr. Chairman,
How dare anyone take
I know,
Ann's shade
right.
tree away?
so in consultation with the DPW director, it was determined that that tree, as everybody knows, it's a barren wasteland out there right now, and we're trying to, as we go forward here, clean that area up for short money to make it look like you might expect a town hall complex to look. As part of that effort, it was determined that unfortunately that tree, it's a pine tree, was making it very difficult for the grass to grow in that area, and so it was determined that it would come down.
Okay, I thought maybe the king took it for a mast or something. Also, there was a road race in town on Saturday, and I think a lot of people would appreciate if they just posted a map. If you just posted a map on the town website about where the race would go, so people know to stay away from those areas and not get caught up. When you get a dead end or a closed road. Thank you.
I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment this evening? So I just have a couple of things. One is, how many people get packages from Amazon? Everybody, right? So over the last 6 or 7 months, I kept getting these packages for, so my number of my house is 4. So I kept getting these packages for 4, and it's a different road in town. So I kept getting their packages, so I would take their packages, I looked it up, I took their packages, and I would deliver them and just drop them off. I mean, they got it to the wrong place, so just go and take them. So over this weekend, we were away, and I came home, and there were 5 packages, all to that same address that had a 4. So this morning, when I was returning the rental car, because we drove to Ohio, and that's a whole nother story for another day, I took all 5 packages. I was going up to the airport. I pull in this person's driveway, and the husband is standing out front. And I pull up, and I said, "Hi, I'm here with all your Amazon packages." And he looks at me, and he's like, "Well, we've been wondering where those are." I give them all 5 packages. Turns out I probably should have went last night. I was a little tired. It was all stuff for their children's day camp that they were going to today. And that she had been on the phone with them until midnight saying, where are my packages? And of course, they had pictures of it at my house where the packages were. And they said, "That's not my house." So I gave him my cell phone number and said, in the future, if you're missing your packages, just give me a call. But he was astonished by the fact that that he says, well, how'd you find my house so easily? I said, well, I've been here like 3 other times dropping off packages. He's like, what? So if you're not getting your package from Amazon, give me a call. Who knows? I might have it, right? But just be aware that this is happening. So we've added some new roads, and they're confusing them with the with those pieces. The other thing is that we have 2 elections coming up here rather quickly. So we have the primary in September, in which school will be in session. I believe that's on the 13th. We're expecting somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 people to come and vote in the primary. So we're already working with the schools to clear the parking lots and to work with us. In November, we're expecting to have presidential numbers. The last time we had presidential numbers, we had 17,500 people out of 21,000 people come and vote. The schools will be closed for parent conferences that day. There will be no students there. But what I want to ask the council is that we probably need to look at some reconfiguration of the parking lots and different things we want to do. So I want to ask the council for consensus from myself and one other councilor possibly to meet with the fire chief, the police department, the schools, alert, and whomever else is necessary, so that we can come up with the right configuration so that we can have emergency access to the building, and so that the emergency lanes are clear, the handicap is clear, and that when we have that number of people moving through that site, we'll be ready to respond in the event of some sort of an emergency. So I'm looking for a consensus.
Sounds good to me.
Pretty good with that?
Very good.
Great, so we'll move forward with looking at that. Anything else for public comment tonight? All right, with that said, I'm going to move to our first item. Our first item in tonight's schedule is a public hearing. This is,
Make a motion to open public hearing?
thank you. Need a second?
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes in the affirmative. Ordinance 2022-05, an ordinance creating a Londonderry Commercial and Industrial Tax Incentive Program. This has been continued a couple of times. The idea behind this particular program is that while there's varying opinions, we have very limited tools here in New Hampshire to be able to drive tax revenue. And what I keep hearing from the people in the community is that we need some tax relief. The veterans asked for some tax relief. The seniors have asked for tax relief. I all wish you'd go to the with all due respect to the school board and everything else, I wish somebody'd go ask them for the tax relief and not ask me. But it's but we have to, if we're going to give any type of tax relief, we got to drive more revenue. So this is one of the tools that we're looking at to do that. So to you, Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great setup. This is, as you noted, only the most recent time I've been here to discuss this program. It was initially tabled at the end of last year and redesigned by me, I think, to address a lot of the concerns that the public had and that the council might have had about this. Tonight, I would just highlight a couple of different things. There was a discussion last time about could we get some more information about this program and how it's been used in other communities, and specifically in Milford. Hitchner Manufacturing was mentioned, and so I supplied in the materials some information about Hitchner Manufacturing and a new $50 million, 85,000 square foot foundry that was able to be built through this program. And what struck me about this article is the company looked at the cost of building in New Hampshire versus the cost of going elsewhere and found it was initially too expensive to stay in the Granite State when adding up business taxes, state and local taxes, as well as energy and construction costs in New Hampshire. We obviously had a large gap that we needed to close if we were to build here. I also reached out to the town administrator in Milford and requested some information. Haven't gotten that additional information from him back yet, but can certainly pass that along when it does come through. I reached out to the state, both Michael Bergeron, who handles business development for the state, and also the Department of Revenue Administration. And the Department of Revenue Administration provided me with a report showing the status of this exemption. in tax year 2020. And at that time, there were 15 structures currently receiving a tax exemption under this program for a total exemption amount of $2.7 million. And late-breaking numbers as of today, these were just posted. There are now 19 municipalities that have adopted this program. There are 18 properties statewide that are receiving an exemption, and the total exemption being granted is up to $3.4 million. That is for the 2021 tax year. And so a couple of other things. I supplied you with both the application materials and the ordinance or background materials from a number of different municipalities that have adopted this. Berlin, Derry, Allenstown, just a whole host of other communities around the state. I think that's good information for you and for the public to look through. And then lastly, I had a conversation with the town administrator in Derry and the director of economic development there. They appointed me to the LaBelle Winery property and specifically spoke about how with this program they were able to not only attract LaBelle, but retain LaBelle and get LaBelle to invest more heavily and more significantly in the community. The PowerPoint presentation that LaBelle put on before the Derry Town Council is included in your materials. And also some good information there. Lastly, just to reiterate, we are not seeking to cultivate commercial and industrial uses as an end in itself. We are seeking to do this because it is one of the precious few tools that we have in our toolbox to be able to try to stabilize the shift in the tax base from commercial to residential. That is, we are trying to assist the residential taxpayer, and this is one way that we're able to do that.
So with that, I had a retail commercial taxpayer talk to me last week. This particular retailer has been in town over 30 years and said to me, he says, I don't understand what's going on. He says, 4 years ago, I paid $30,000 in taxes. He says, last year I paid $28,000. He says, this year I'm paying $25,000. He says, why are my taxes going down? And then I had to explain to him about, you look at the residential appraisal, all the valuations, they're skyrocketing. So where we used to be at 55% commercial and 45% residential, that has switched. Now we're at 55% residential, 45% commercial, because the commercial properties don't go up as quickly and don't have the same level of demand that we've seen in the real estate market. I explained this to the school board 5 years ago, long before Mr. Slater was on the school board. And, and one of the reasons I think he ran is I said, this is coming. This is coming. We need to start getting ready for this. It's here now. So that's why we're looking for more tools to be able to go out to that community to be able to drive more revenue.
That's exactly the point. And I would just add along those lines, if there were something that we could do to tax businesses less favorably than residences, we would do that. Unfortunately, the law just doesn't allow us to do that. And so we have to be creative about how to support the residential taxpayer with the programs that we have.
Questions from the council?
I see that, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please
I
proceed.
see that you've made the changes that we requested. The only thing I would point out is that the sentences were, I think, cleaned up quite well, except for 13.6, where I think the months were just not added in. I think it was, we were trying to put it in, but it was whited out as well. The 13.6 says the ordinance shall expire blank months after its passage.
That's right. I apologize for that, Mr. Vice Chairman. The copy just wiped that out. It's 24 months is what that should read.
The rest of the sentences have been edited correctly according to what we talked about last time, so.
And I would add, Mr. Vice Chairman, that there is also a clean copy of the ordinance.
After, yep.
I was reluctant to include both the red line and the clean copy, but that's why they're both in there.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes, Steph.
Oops, sorry. On the New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration information that you supplied to us
Yes,
on the 17 towns that participate in this,
yes.
and out of that 17, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 that are actually taking advantage of it. And you say that Derry's listed, but under this thing, Derry is not adopted it.
Right. So the report that you're looking at is for the 2020 tax year, and I believe it's prepared off of the MS1. I'm not sure what the timing of the MS1 is, but I don't think it hits exactly at the end of a tax year. I read to you the 2021 numbers as well, and Derry is not reflected. And I speculate that that is because Derry adopted the ordinance following the preparation of the MS1 for 2021. Does that make sense, Steve?
So I'm just trying to put the timeline together. So did LaBelle Winery approach Derry first, and then they put this in play for them? Or did they have this in play already, and then the winery approached them?
I don't have an answer to that question.
Based on the timing of when I know LaBelle went in and everything, and how long that property was abandoned, I'm guessing that it motivated it happening.
I want to say I think it's LaBelle went to them. but-
I would be.
Well,
I don't know.
I think we're saying the same thing.
I just wanted to be clear.
I will note that LaBelle is not the only taxpayer taking advantage of this program in Derry.
Again, I just, I think this is just put in place for Woodmont, and I'll say it, I'll be the elephant in the room. It started out for Woodmont. I complained about just treating one business different. I did ask to give me 5 examples of businesses that are existing in town that could take it. John had a conversation with one of them, so there's one that may or may not take advantage of this. Again, I think this is all for Woodmont, and so I struggle with it. I just don't think we should be in the business of helping developers.
I believe that Mr. Hamilton does have some information about.
Oh, good.
Is that right? Oh, no worries. So this is not just for Woodmont. In fact, as you pointed out, it was originally proposed as being available only in the 300 acres to the east side of I-93, Woodmont Commons 12. That's the Exit 4A area. If I had wanted to confine this to Woodmont, I would have stuck with the ordinance that we had proposed in the fall. Rather than confining this to Woodmont, I have rewritten it and submitted it to you townwide. It is true that some of the largest remaining undeveloped parcels are at Woodmont Commons. They are part of that development. However, there are other remaining undeveloped parcels where you might see a building value of $15 million or $30 million. And so there is no backroom deal here with Woodmont.
Didn't say that. I just pointed out to the fact that it went from Woodmont area, got pushback, it then went to the town-wide. I just still believe in my heart of hearts that there's not a backroom deal, but it is geared towards promoting Woodmont to move forward. I guess maybe they should have did that in phases instead of giving them 20 years.
You're right about one thing. I want Woodmont to move forward, just
do
like I
too.
want all other parts of the town to move forward. And if this program can assist with that, I think most people in this room would be happy.
And again, I'll still say the same thing I've been saying forever. We keep saying Londonderry's so great. We have 2 exits. We have an airport. And yet, I was just down Sunday at Tuscan Village. They're building and building and building and building without any of these things. That's it. all I got to say.
Anybody else from the council? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to comment on this subject only? Yes, sir.
I'm gonna sit down so you can see me. The lectern's a little tall for me.
Could I have your name and address, young
Tony
man?
DeFrancesco, Cheshire Court. I watched with interest at the last meeting, all the nonsense that went on as a result of the introduction of this tool. And Mr. Chairman, you have used the word tool several times already tonight, and it is a tool. That's all it is a tool.
I understand.
If you move this thing forward, which I think you should, then you have an opportunity when the businesses come in to make a presentation to you to say yes or no, if I'm reading it correctly.
Exactly
I'm
right.
getting nods, so I'm reading it correctly. So it cost nothing to have this ordinance on the books. Absolutely nothing. And I will tell you, last week, you all were subjected to a lot of misinformation. A lot. I watched the tape right before I came here tonight. And I'm going to talk about some of that with your permission.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So, first of all, let's get one thing straight. In southern New Hampshire, south of Concord, we're competing. This is a competition for revenue. The only chance we have to help the seniors, other than the $250,000 you gave them last month, the only chance we have to help the seniors and the people that are having a hard time with their taxes is to drive revenue. This is a tool to drive revenue. It's nothing else, it's nothing more, it's nothing else. It's a tool for you all, to help businesses. And it's not Sally Zeiler's haircutting school. We're talking about $15 million buildings, $30 million buildings. We're talking on the high side of commercial, probably mostly industrial. And again, the way this is written, they're going to come in here to make a presentation to decide if you want it or you don't want it. Now, I've been here 44 years in town. I came in 1978. And I want to tell you that people that were sitting in the chairs that you're sitting in right now, that were then called selectmen, really screwed up Exit 5. It went from a transfer station to a dump. It looks like a dump up there. And it turned into that because people that were sitting in your chairs didn't do the right thing. And all anybody said was, well, we don't want any big box stores. We don't want any big box stores. Well, I'll tell you what, I would like to have those big box stores. I would like to have Exit 10 at Exit 5, which is who is coming. I would like to have that tax relief. Instead, Hooksett got it. Okay? So please keep that in mind, because revenue is the only chance Londonderry has. It's the only chance. You can't cut John's budget anymore. He's got to relay the roads. He's got to get rid of the potholes. He's got to plow in the winter. He's got to put fuels in the trucks. You can only control so much by cutting spending. And I will tell you, there's a lot of people in this town, a lot of people, who are very happy with the services here. They're paying a lot of money. They expect the services. So please keep that in mind. Again, it costs nothing for you to vote this forward and put it on the books. Costs absolutely nothing. Reducing spending is not the total answer. It's part of the answer. Is some of it necessary? Probably. That's why you have a budget committee. That's why we go through that process for almost a year. That's why those people volunteer their time away from their families to help give the citizens an idea of what's going on. Now, we got to understand, too, that it was mentioned at the last meeting, there was testimony given that this was going on the backs of the taxpayers. That's not true. That's not what this does. Right now, you have a piece of land, I'm going to call it zero revenue. That's not true because vacant land pays some taxes, but I'm going to call it zero. Would you rather have zero or would you rather have 50 cents? And then a year later, would you like to have 75 cents? And then a year later, 90 cents. And then the fourth year or the fifth year or whatever you decide, it went from 10 to 5, I think. Now you get 100% forever instead of zero. How is that bad? That's not bad. That's a good thing. No one's paying anything more. No one has to make up the difference. It was testimony given that the taxpayers are going to have to make up the difference. There is no difference. It's zero. The difference is you're going to get 50 cents more the next year to budget with instead of zero. What a great concept. Bring in revenue. That's part of your job. Municipal finance is not the same as a homeowner's checkbook. It's not today, it never was, it never will be, it's not the same. It's different. You all are making a budget almost a year ahead of time, a year and 3 months ahead of time, trying to figure out what fuel prices are going to be for the police cars in a year and a half. God love you. This has nothing to do with the market. There was also testimony given by a citizen who said that if you do this, it's going to subdue, that was the word that was used, subdue other commercial property. I looked for a week. I found no evidence of that, no research of that, no comment about that anywhere. That tells me that's not true. There is no chance that this could subdue other commercial properties. We don't have enough of it, for one thing, even if you look at it conceptually. Now, keep in mind, too, the rehabbing doesn't count. And if I'm reading this correctly, a nod is fine. If I'm reading this correctly, you have to, if you're doing a rehab, the cost of what you originally had doesn't count.
Correct.
It's what you do on top of that, or beside that, or around that, or whatever.
Exactly.
But the taxpayers and the town doesn't lose the value of the original property that they add on to, up, down, sideways, inside out, dig a tunnel, whatever. And remember, we're talking about the value has to be $15 or more, $15 million or more. That's a heck of a renovation, even with today's prices of $65 for a sheet of plywood. So I want to close by saying, please do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If you have anything you would like to address on this item only, and you'd like to address the council, yes, sir.
John Wilson, Tranquil Drive.
Hi, Mr. Wilson, how are you?
Pretty good. I came here tonight, originally came here tonight, not to talk about this, but I will. But I came here because I wanted to voice an opinion about the senior tax exemption situation. And it wasn't until this morning when I looked at the agenda that I realized that you people had this on the agenda for tonight. So, in any case, that's why I came here. So I wasn't planning on talking about this situation at all. But given that I'm here, I do have some, off the top of my head, comments. The first thing is, has anybody sat down and ran some scenarios on this, okay? Given where we are in probably the most uncertain economic situation the country has been in 50 years or so, and what are the various possibilities of how this is all gonna play in the tax rate and actually the commercial side of the business. You know, the bubble is going to break. I think, it's not a certainty, but the bubble on the real estate market is going to break. It's going to go down. I think it's going, if it breaks, I don't think it's necessarily going to drive down construction costs at the same time. But has anybody been through that exercise to start looking at the what-ifs, okay?
So what we've directed the staff to do and we started this process early on here, we almost started it at budget time last year when I kept asking the question is how are we gonna pay for $5 gas when it was $3? So it's been an ongoing scenario and direction to the staff to start getting ready for budget, but our budget process will be in November, trying to predict a year from now and start running worst-case scenarios. What's going to happen if this happens? What's going to happen if it's $10 gas? What are we going to do? What services are we going to have to surrender to be able to keep going forward? So we gave them that direction, it's probably about 6 weeks ago. I mean, it was probably right, beginning of May, somewhere in the beginning of May timeframe. So we started that whole process because we started hearing the same rumblings that everybody's hearing in the economy now.
Yeah, but I was more thinking in terms of a larger picture. If the real estate market collapses, okay, is this really gonna help us at all? Now, one could argue, well, to make it a little bit cheaper to come here, maybe, but I don't think we're gonna be competing for anything. Now,
And then we won't use it.
yeah, but I would just say, table this thing, because the world's not gonna come to an end if we don't make a decision on this now. I would table this and push it out until we understand whether we're in a collapse mode or just, a short recession and so on. The other thing is, which is off the top of my head, I am extraordinarily reluctant to agree with the concept of making this tax break apply to Woodmont or the airport process. We have poured a lot of money into the airport in Woodmont, okay? We still have to pay for our small portion now of the exit, okay? We've already, when that
Just so you're
started-
aware, that's already allocated and paid for.
What?
That is already allocated and paid for.
We've paid all the $5 million out?
Already allocated.
Is it paid, if we paid it?
It's sitting in an account and it's the only thing we can use it for.
In addition to that, we paid them when that settlement was put into place, I think $1.5 million, plus we billed the extension of the store system for another $2.5 million. And there were some other odds and ends, but we put a lot of money into that. Then on top of that, we put through the zoning ordinance over there, with the PUD. That made that property extraordinarily easier for them to develop, okay? And we were told, and I agree with the other selectmen over here, that was we've created, we were told, the most attractive real estate for commercial development in the state, okay? And then we put in the road up at the airport to turn that into
All
another
bought
piece.
and-
And to a degree at least, that road did help us bring in some tax revenue. A lot of
Tremendous.
tax.
Tremendous amount of tax
Tremendous.
revenue.
And we've
What our taxes
done
would be if
un-
not.
As far as I'm concerned, the town has done more than the average share of helping these developments succeed. Now it's time for us to reap that, not have to give more concessions. Now, I would exclude those two properties, but on the Woodmont property, I could see myself, if I were king, I'd say, yeah, I would consider adding Woodmont in, but I'd want to renegotiate the development agreement, and I'd like to renegotiate and make changes to the PUD. And then town could get some things back, and Woodmont can get some help selling the property.
Let me ask a question.
But I'm definitely against those two pieces.
Like, there's like 5 or 6 things, but, okay.
So, Mr. Wilson, I appreciate the comments, and we're way off topic. So we can have a separate.
We're not way off topic.
Well,
I'm saying
well,
I'm against
well,
you
Mr.
doing
Wilson,
this.
I get to run the meeting, and we're way off topic, in my opinion. I respect everything that you're saying and everything, but I'm not going to answer all the questions tonight. A number of statements that you made are missing pieces of information, and I do completely respect what you're saying, but with regards to Woodmont, the TIFs at the airport, that's a 2-hour conversation. So, and I do appreciate that you're bringing them up, but right now, we're running tax positive in all those areas.
I'm not just saying we're not. I'm just suggesting, the point was, I'm suggesting to you that we've already contributed a lot of money and time and effort into both of those developments to help them succeed. I don't think we need to do any more. That's all.
I understand. And I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Oh, one other thing. I did come tonight to talk about the senior.
And I'm going to be happy to let everybody talk about that when we
Okay,
get to that.
that's right. I wanna know
I mean,
if I
my policy is even during that section, there's really not public comment, but you all came down here, and I'm going to let you speak. Anyone else on this item only? All right, yes, Ann.
I just had a question about it. When this was originally proposed, was it for both commercial and industrial properties?
Yes.
I thought when Woodmont was planned east of 93, I didn't think it was going to be industrial from the image they proposed to us. I know the underlying zoning parts of it are industrial, but that wasn't the vision for Woodmont, definitely not.
So all the uses that are allowed are inside of the agreement that was filed with the deed. So that agreement was hashed out on what pieces are allowed and what are not allowed inside that. And it's a very long, detailed document. I can't speak to exactly which properties they were. I believe you may have better knowledge on them than I do.
Yeah, so, I mean, she's exactly right, that on the east side of 93, it does not contemplate heavy industrial uses. That's
No.
correct. I believe residential is
heavy
permitted over
commercial.
there. It's got a name, it's like flex use, it's like a flex zone or flex uses or something like that. And so, that's correct. I had in my mind, oh yeah, big stuff over there, but that's
yeah.
not the case in terms of heavy industrial uses on the east side of the highway.
Because I just remember that Woodmont wouldn't allow gas stations in there, and that's C2. So now is that a go? Because it's,
Right, so nothing, if adopted, nothing in this ordinance would affect the PUD zoning. In fact, I think that, to your point, if it's possible that some parts of Woodmont, in fact, it is the case that some parts of Woodmont do not allow commercial or industrial uses, and therefore this tax exemption would not be available. In fact, for all of the residential tracts in Woodmont, this exemption will not be available.
isn't there a lot of live-work units in there for commercial?
I
Commercial,
don't, yeah,
residential?
that's a good question. I don't know exactly
Yeah.
if the definition of commercial would encompass a live-work use.
Or commercial, first floor and residential above?
Back on the ordinance.
Right, I know, but it's,
I
I
understand.
mean,
but
I'm just thinking,
working on this
how
right
many
now.
years we've been through this with Woodmont and the vision
This is
they
not a Woodmont
proposed.
discussion. This
Right,
is-
I know, but it was initially proposed
understand.
for them.
I-
And if
And
this,
and it's not any longer, it's for every place.
I know, but the
So,
reason and the makeup of it
I understand.
was commercial, industrial, and that was
I
Woodmont.
understand. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Now, we have some regulations in town that promote, I think, residential development.
Is this about this ordinance, Ann?
I could try to make it.
Well, thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. I'm not going to talk
But
about other
I was just
ordinances
going to
right
say
now.
alternatives, what we can do.
I understand, but I'm not going to talk about other ordinances right now, and I'm not proposing other ordinances. I'm talking about this ordinance.
Right, I know.
I
My first
appreciate
time
it.
at bat here, I
I
wasn't at the other
understand. I
meetings.
mean, sorry. I'm not going to talk about other things. I'm only talking about this. That's all I can do in a public hearing.
Okay, I think that's enough for me, but I just want to mention, no seniors didn't get a $250,000 break. It was veterans. And,
That is what I said. I said the veterans did. I said the seniors have been asking for one.
right, right.
That's right.
But not all seniors can get it, so,
That's right.
thank you.
Yes?
I wanted to be able to answer some of the questions regarding what types of properties might we anticipate if
Terrific.
this were available? Because it's not an exemption program that would apply to these existing buildings. The buildings I'm going to talk about now are the types of buildings that would qualify because of the value of the building if someone came along and availed themselves of the program. So properties like the F.W. Webb building, that is, in terms of building value, $48,635,000 property. It's a very significant building. But even that building, if they wish to try to avail themselves of any of this, they would have to expand or renovate to the $15 million minimum. And then the exemption would only apply to that new value, not the 48 million that is already there.
Can I pause you there for a second?
Yeah.
So that new value, right, that was just created, that would create extra tax revenue, correct?
Correct.
Would that extra tax revenue go to reduce the revenue and tax rate of other residential properties possibly?
So every, I think $27 million is going to produce another $500,000 in revenue to the town. So every project that adds $27 million in value is going to offset $500,000 that has to be raised from everybody. It can't be targeted to just the residential property, but it, a rising tide will lift all boats.
So if I have $5,000 more, real simple math, if I have $5,000 more in cost and I just got 8,000, 5,000 more in cost and 8,000 more in revenue, now I get 3,000 more in to spend, right? Not only have I paid for the extra cost, the price of gas, the price of whatever went up, not only have I paid for that, but I also got a little bit more to reduce the tax rate.
Right.
Okay.
And
Just want to make sure.
And importantly, it is only about the new value that would come with a developer who decided to build something of lasting value here in the town that will importantly offset those revenues for a long period of time. So another example would be the UPS Pratt and Whitney building at 52 Pettingill Road. That is a $41 million property. There is significant value in the Woodmont development where the Market Basket project, part of the project, is about $21 million value. But now that drops down to the second tier. So that's going to be about properties that are not as favorably treated in this exemption program. But,
So Steve.
yep,
If I'm doing my math right, Webb pays us about a little over $1 million a year in taxes.
correct.
So if they do a $15 million improvement, they're going to pay us $332,000 more under this program, but it will stage out over the 5 years.
It will step in over the 5-year period.
So if they make the $15 million investment here versus building another building in Concord, that may be something. Or if the Pratt Whitney building is paying us $881,000 a year. So just up on those two properties alone, up on Pettingill Road, we're looking at an additional $2 million a year up there. Plus the EFI building is probably another $700,000. So that's $2.5 million since we did the TIF up there.
Right.
And what, do you remember what the TIF cost us?
So
I don't have that number.
It was about $3 million. So we paid $3 million once and we're getting $3 million every year.
Well, this type of,
Seems like it worked out all right.
I just wanted to make sure that I could answer the question, what kinds of properties would this apply to? And importantly, how would it technically work? Because no one who has a building now and is doing nothing to it is not going to be able to get an exemption under this program, period.
Understood.
That would violate the state law, not only the ordinance that you are contemplating.
Thanks for your clarity. Appreciate it.
Any more questions from the council?
I don't have any more questions. I know this is gonna move forward, so I would just like to recommend, out of all the forms that you put out there, I like the more detailed one, like Swansea and Hennecup. So I would hope that we would have a really detailed form like they do.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I will ensure that it is, solicits all the appropriate information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So after all this time, I'll accept the motion either to approve or defeat this.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this as written.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
All right.
Aye.
Opposed?
No?
Motion carries. Next item, acceptance of unanticipated revenue under RSA 31:95B. Hi, Justin.
Hey, how are we? So we have two separate resolutions here. We'll start with number 12, which is to accept $17,190 to purchase and install various playground musical equipment, as well as pay for the installation of the Omni Spinner, which was previously purchased. This is to go to the Sensory Playground Edition that takes place at, I believe it's called Funway Park, right behind the fire station at the Laffa Fields.
Any questions from the council? Any questions from the audience? I'll accept the motion to approve.
So moved, Chairman.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
All right.
Resolution 2022-12 is approved. How about 2022-13?
Yes, this is it's called the Locality Grant from Gopher. It is intended to help purchase equipment to combat the health crisis. We have applied for this and are awaiting final approval. This is $50,000 with a match of 10%.
This is 2213?
Yes. The Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery for up to $50,000.
Hold on. Yeah, I have two, I'm sorry, I have an order and a resolution. I just got them
Oh, okay.
confused. Are there any questions?
Motion to approve resolution 2022-13.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
All right.
Chair votes affirmative. And that's all you got for tonight? I'll accept the motion to close the public hearing.
So moved, Chairman.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
All right.
Chair votes in the affirmative. Okay, we took care of that one. 13 is good. Order 2022-13.
Mr. Chairman, that's one that I'm covering tonight for DPW Director Wally. He has another commitment. This is for HVAC units number 12 and 13 at Town Hall that went down. They needed to be serviced to identify a pretty tricky leak. It's for the council for your order and consideration.
Any questions? Accept the motion to approve.
So moved.
And a second, please. Second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
All right.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Just,
2214.
can I just ask you a quick question? I think I'm getting screwed up on the same thing you are, because both of these
I
orders
have a
say,
resolution and an order.
I know, both of them say orders. So I think one would just, should say
There might be
13.
a repeat.
Should say 13. No, the one we just approved was, should have been 13, but it says 14.
I don't know, I've got one for 13.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got one here for 13.
All right, as long as you have the written one with the signature, that's all that counts.
So 2214.
Thank you.
This one is for expenditure of reclamation trust funds. Mr. Chartier.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is requesting the expenditure of $21,470 from the Reclamation Trust Fund for recycling carts and parts. About a year ago, I was here where we had gotten the release for about the same number of carts. Again, it's just to maintain our supply and keep the carts up and running.
So I've learned recently that we don't keep these on site, they're kept at the vendor.
Correct.
So are they actually doing the repairs to them for us?
They do it at their site
So the
as well.
vendor repairs the cans and then delivers them?
Correct.
And we don't keep them up at Public Works?
No, we do not.
Well, that sounds good.
Yep.
That's something new I learned. Accept, any questions? Accept the motion to approve?
So moved.
All those in favor, signify by saying
Need
aye.
a second, need a second.
Did I hear a second? Second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
All right,
Chair votes in the affirmative.
Thank you.
Elderly exemption, eligibility criteria and discussion. Okay, folks, as I stated earlier and everything, I understand you all came down here. I'm gonna let Mr. Hamilton go ahead and give his presentation. Happy to entertain your questions. Let's hear his presentation all the way through, so he may answer a number of the questions. One of the things that that folks need to, understand is that when folks come in and they talk to us about exemptions from, or tax relief, or changing our policies around eligibility for tax relief is as, you know, the other gentleman mentioned early on, we budget a year and 3 months out in advance. So we don't have a crystal ball. We budget a certain amount of revenue, such as we did with the veterans exemption is that we broke our own rule and gave the exemption even though we didn't have the revenue to pay for it. So when we went ahead and we did that, people started talking about doing something for the seniors. So we ran some numbers based on some things that may be a possibility or may change, and those numbers come in at something like $1 million to $2 million. Well, we don't have $1 million to $2 million. So if we're gonna do something like what Mr. Hamilton's gonna talk about and describe to us and everything is, this may be something that we have to entertain as part of the budget in November, or something that may need to go to the ballot with the voters, and they may need to make the decision because we're talking about a very large number. So just keep that all in mind as we go into this.
can I just bring this up really quick?
Yeah.
Also to set the stage, when I brought this to two of you guys many months ago, there was some specific examples that we gave you, and one of the things that I think we'd like to clarify in public and on the TV is that when we went back and forth discussing it, one of the questions that came up was when somebody loses a spouse and now they're single, right? Are they really single? You know, they're still married, they still wear their ring. Are they still single? And should they consider their income of their spouse, or shouldn't they consider their income of the spouse based on that status of single versus married? And I think it would be good for you to explain that a little bit, because it's a state statute. It's not something we can actually agree on, right? So just if you could clarify that, thank you.
And I'd be happy to, Mr. Vice Chair.
So is that all? Do you need us to say anything else or just
No,
listen?
we're all done here, I guess.
Well, that was very kind of you, but we'll listen to what you have to say.
And Mr. Chair and councilors, thank you so much for hearing me tonight. And what I wanted to do is present to you some information and some analysis about what the qualification limits are for a single person, a married couple, and the asset limits that apply here in the town of Londonderry. And importantly, how do they compare with most of our neighboring communities, but also some other peer-type communities that might have similar attributes and want to be considered in a pool of analysis. And so currently, we addressed last fall the amount of the exemption per category to be 144,000 for 65 to 74, 180,000 for 75 to 79, and 240,000 for 80 plus. And so those were adjusted for the results of the revaluation that had occurred last year in order to make sure that the same approximate bang for the buck, as it were, was available to taxpayers who had previously qualified for the exemption. What we're looking at are the income and asset limits. And in Londonderry, the single income limit is 40,800. The married income limit is 50,300. The asset limit for both single and married is $137,000. Now, the last time that this was adjusted was effective for April 1st of 2019. And there had been no adjustments since then. And there probably has been a lot of shifting around, especially this year, of what communities are doing. And so I've listed the income and asset limits for Hooksett, Merrimack, Exeter, Portsmouth, Hollis, Hudson, Wyndham, Amherst, Bedford, Derry, Nashua, and Manchester, to give a sense of the scope of what other communities do for the qualification standards. And importantly, I've included the number of exemptions granted because I think that helps to set the stage of what the impact is in each of the communities and how they have determined those threshold amounts and what kind of impact it might have on the number of people that would qualify. I've looked at those income limits, and I started as a source with the Department of Revenue Administration, and as Mr. Malaguti found out that sometimes those can be a little bit stale, and so I went to each of the communities to verify the current asset and income levels in these communities. The median of those single income limits, so that would be the midpoint, not the average, but the midpoint of them arrayed, is $45,000 per year. For single, for married, it's $55,000. And for the asset limits, it's $160,000 for each, the single and married categories. I think another important way to look at this is to see the impact of inflation. We all hear inflation, we know inflation. All we have to do is go to the grocery store and we find inflation. If we look at the CPI calculated inflation from April of 19 to April of 2022, and when I put this together, that was the last month that was available. The change in the CPI inflation rate was about 13%. And so applying that 13% to the current 40,800 income limit and the 50,300 for the married comes up with an indication of 46,100 for single and 56,800 for married. Similarly, applying that 13% to the asset limit, you'd wind up at 154,800 roughly. And finally, I thought it was important to look at the impact of changes to the Social Security benefits. So I've calculated the cost of living adjustments within Social Security from 2019 to 2022, and that is currently at 1.09. And looking at those indications, we would be at 44,472 for single and 54,800 roughly for married. Interestingly, there's a pretty narrow range of each one of these approaches to look at what an adjustment might look like. And I'm not here to create that ordinance for you, but to provide you with this information so that you'll have something to work with as you move into the future and want to analyze it. And if it does appear that for the November budgetary timeframe, it's appropriate to make these beginning steps of making the changes, I'd be happy to refresh this analysis and look at what the current information would be at that point. And I'd happily answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman? Please. So can you explain to me, just to clarify, the amount of exemption per age category? That's the total amount that, as an example, Londonderry would give to somebody or exempt to somebody 65 to 74. How does that 144,000, what does that represent?
So that's the amount of value in a person's property that they don't have to pay taxes on. So
If approved.
if they qualify for the exemption, then the first 144,000 in value is exempt.
Okay, and that's the third lowest, fourth, fifth lowest in the ones that you gave right here? Why would that be? That, especially where we have values increasing in Londonderry, wouldn't that number have to be adjusted too? I know you talked about the number of exemptions and we went through this whole process of income limits, et cetera, but shouldn't that number be adjusted as well?
Well, I think that is most appropriately adjusted during revaluation.
So when was the last time, I'm not
Wait,
putting you
yep.
on a trial here. When was the last time? Was it 2019?
No, 2021, just last fall.
It's 2021's.
Yeah, just
Okay,
last
'cause
fall.
The rest was 2019. That's where I was confused. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect, thank you.
Yeah, and so what each community can do, this works kind of like a car radio, okay? Each community, you can change the channel and you can adjust the volume. And those are the choices that you can make. And so some communities will make a choice to have a very generous benefit, but then have some higher qualification standards. And so I put those in there importantly so that you could see the interplay between who's very generous and what is the qualification standard. Some towns around the state will have a very generous qualification threshold, but they'll give a very low amount of benefit.
So all I'd say to the council members that are up here, and I understand what John's been talking about, and I absolutely have to take that into consideration. This is something we also should look at, because if we have one of the highest populations of seniors in the state of New Hampshire, we should be at the top of the level there, I would think. So just a matter of thought.
Yeah, and again, that's not a matter for me to decide. That's a matter for you all to decide. And I'd be happy to help you if you want to examine that. My initial recommendation is that having those adjustments to value coincide with revaluation activity is the critical point in time. The values, aside from changes due to new construction, for example, or additions to properties, the underlying values have not changed since 2021. And they're not scheduled to change again until next year in 2023.
Good.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just amplify a couple of points that Mr. Hamilton made.
Please
I
proceed.
think he would agree that potentially increasing the amount of the exemption is a little bit easier to project and budget for than increasing or expanding the eligibility requirements. And the reason is that we know who's receiving this exemption now. And so we can project out with pretty reasonable certainty what the total cost would be. What really, I think, keeps Steve and I up at night is expanding the eligibility requirements is a really delicate exercise. And the reason is that the town of Londonderry does not track people's incomes or asset levels. And so the only people that we have that information, the only people whose income and asset level information that we have are, one, the people who are already receiving this exemption, or two, the handful of people who have applied for these exemptions and not received them. They've been found not to be eligible. We don't know how many people are out there who might qualify for an expanded benefit, and the consequences of getting that wrong could be catastrophic. And so that's why I think Mr. Hamilton is suggesting we need to take a very deliberate, careful approach when we do expand that benefit. And that's why it should be done in the context of the budget process.
May I comment on that, Mr. Chairman?
Please feel free.
So I think, Mike, I appreciate what you're saying, but I understand the 1-2 punch scenario, because that's really what we're talking about. All I'm saying is that we should take into consideration that we say, oh, great, your values went up in '21, and now you get $100,000 more equity. And everybody that come to me saying, oh, my tax rate, well, you paid another $1,000, but you get $100,000 more in the bank for equity. That made sense to them, right, or whatever. But in the same situation here, if we didn't adjust this, the amount that they can actually get and use as an exemption, even though those values went up, we made that delta even bigger. So I'm just saying it should kind of go up the same way. And I appreciate that you said this was changed in 2021. That's what I was most concerned with. So,
And to amplify that same point, the assets that we count, they don't include the equity that you own in your home. So that's not part of the consideration for assets. And
So, right.
so
Okay.
the assets counts everything other than equity that you have in your home.
okay.
So with some quick calculations I did here, we give $804,000 in actual money in relief today.
Approximately.
So, approximately. So that's what we budget for now. If we're gonna give more relief, and, we have to budget for it. We didn't budget for $5 gas. We have to take that from someplace else. But if we're gonna give any relief, we've got to budget for it. We can't just change it.
And to Mr. Malaguti's point, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know if we said to you, increase it by 50%, we couldn't say we'll have a 50% increase in the number of people. There could be a 500% increase in the number of people. It could be exponential. It isn't a stretch for me to say that we get inquiries all the time of people who want to know, can I get an exemption because I'm old? And we walk them through the qualifications. This happened to me at our counter this morning. And the person who was at the counter heard about the thresholds and said, well, there's no way I can't qualify for that. So people don't apply when they know they can't get it. And so that's the reason why we don't have a really good pool of information about people who can't qualify. And we can't really do a lot of fine tuning to say, okay, we could capture 15% more if we change the amount by 12%. We just don't have that information.
Jim? So Steve, this is a tool, right? Unless we talked about tools before, this is a tool that we could use. I am approached, and my fellow councils are approached with people that have created the town of Londonderry. They've been here 30, 40, 50 years, and now they're coming up to me and saying, I can't afford to live in Londonderry anymore. It's my duty as a councilor to make sure that changes, that they can afford to live in Londonderry. That's what I feel like I was voted for and I'm appointed to do. Again, I love Londonderry, but I've only loved Londonderry for 28 years I've been here. They've made Londonderry what it is today. So they deserve to stay here. So how do I make this happen? This is one of the tools.
This is one of the tools.
Yep.
But there are other tools that are available. There is a process by which any property owner who qualifies by age, so they don't have to meet the income or asset limit, but just by age, be 65 years old, they can request that their taxes be deferred into the future. And they'll have to pay a modest 5% interest on the money that they essentially borrow from the equity in their home. And when the home is sold, then it gets paid back to the town. And that process is widely available. We encourage people who come and talk to us about the elderly exemption. If you're qualified and you receive the exemption on part of your taxes, you can ask for part of your taxes to be deferred, the remainder of it. And if you find in a few years that you don't need to access that equity in that way, you can pay it off. You don't have to wait until the point at which you sell your property or you pass. And so it gives a lot of flexibility for people to be able to afford to stay in their home. And we've made that information available on our website. There's an application process that is very simple. Unlike accessing the equity through something like a reverse mortgage, which it takes a lot of time, is expensive, there's no application fee, there's no cost at all.
Mr. Chairman, is there a way that we can ask the town manager to maybe put on the town website with Steve, working with Steve, maybe top 5 things that a person can do to stay in their homes in this situation? And I think that would be a great benefit if the rest of the council would approve that.
I think that's a great idea.
You know, just, look, we can get on the website, you know, talk about it.
Just do it.
Yeah, we're happy to do it.
You know, just
You
put
said
up
the
top-
word, and we're off and running already in our minds.
Whatever it is, top 10, top 5, whatever you can do so that they can
Whatever
go.
we can do is great.
I did, and Mr. Vice Chair, I wanted to answer your question, which is really important, about how do we make a distinction between single and married? And unfortunately, the law provides that a married couple have to be a living couple. And so someone who has had their spouse predecease them, we can't consider them to be married, only in very, very narrow circumstances when the tax return from the prior year reflects a married income and the person may have died recently. And so in those circumstances, we will look at them as having been a married couple when they filed their tax return for that year, because we have to look at the prior year's income. And the last, I think, an important thing that I would say is, I talked to you a few years ago about the process of requalification. Now, the town had historically requalified all of the means-based exemptions on 1/5 every year over a 5-year cycle. We suspended those requalifications during the pandemic, importantly, because of 2 things. We didn't want to increase the pressure on the elderly people to come to town hall to talk to us about their qualification status, but also some of the benefits, some of the payments that were coming from the federal government, according to the courts in New Hampshire, had to be counted as income for the purposes of these determinations. So we suspended that program because we didn't want to push people off based on these, what were occasional payments that came in. And so we've done everything that we can technically and administratively to help people to stay in their homes, and we're happy to give more voice to tactics and strategies. And
When you guys are done with that, can you bring it back to the council and put it on the agenda so we can review it, please?
Absolutely.
you, guys. Thank you very much.
So, folks, as promised, I know a number of you come down here, ask to, if you're down here to ask questions about the elderly tax exemption, happy to take those. I'm gonna apply the public comment rules, which is a 5-minute limit. So if you would like to come up and ask any questions, now would be the time. Nobody has any questions? Yes, sir, Mr. Wilson.
I was curious about the Wyndham.
Let's come to
Should I interpret that unlimited that basically says that they don't, if you're over 80, you don't pay, if you meet the other qualifications, you don't pay any tax at all?
And so, for the record, the question is, in the town of Wyndham, the highest age category has an unlimited amount of value, which is exempted. And so a person that qualifies by meeting the standards pays no taxes. That is true.
Another question.
Go ahead.
Does anybody know the history of how we, somewhere down the line, came up with the concept of the single versus married income limits? It seems to be somewhat consistent by town, but I don't see any rationale as to how you get to those numbers.
And so I remember a lot of things, but I don't remember this.
I'm gonna take a guess. It was probably how you file your taxes.
So it began with the legislature enabling this type of exemption long ago. And they converted it into a program which was in place in every community in the early 1990s, I believe. And at that point, there was a distinction in the law that said that you had to have a minimum for a single category and a minimum that was different and higher for the married category. And so that's the only thing that has made sense to me, but I wasn't there to remember it, so.
It doesn't seem to be much rationale because what we were talking, someone mentioned earlier, if you have a couple and then somebody, one of them passes away, for example, there's no logical reason why that necessarily has anything to do with income.
Understood.
And so that's, you know, and that's gotta happen fairly commonly.
Understood.
Now, one thing that I would say, there are very few things that don't get counted as income, but proceeds from a life insurance policy, that does not get counted as income. It may become part of someone's asset base, but it is not counted by us as income.
Assets are money in the bank, stocks.
Money in the bank, stocks,
1K.
401ks, antique automobiles,
Pension.
artwork, pensions.
Pension from a spouse's.
Everything that, a second home, a piece of land.
Okay.
It will
Just not
be, anything.
equity in the, just not equity in the land.
Not equity in your own home. So the
Okay,
home
no,
that
no.
you reside in, that's exempted from
Okay.
consideration.
Thank you.
So does this align with the state's qualifications for other assistances? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so if you were to get state health insurance, state fuel assistance, state whatever, I mean, does the qualifications kind of align with income, with what they go by?
So I haven't tested it against it, but if you'd like.
I'm just curious.
If
I
you'd
just-
like in the future, I mean, I have, I've looked at the LIHEAP, the Low Income Heating Assistance Program, and I just can't off the top of my head remember what the
I
qualifications.
couldn't either. I was trying to remember as I was sitting here to see if I could figure out the alignment, if that was it, and I
yeah.
couldn't. But I could see how, you guys have to get the data updated because, I mean, so for example, I could be living in my house, I could be 65, 66 years old, and technically my income could be 40,000, right? Or we'll go with married, right? 58,000. And who's to say that there's not somebody else living in my house paying the other bills? And then I'm getting this benefit and bills are getting paid. Do you know what? I
And we
can
have to
see
be
things
really-
like that
We have to
happening.
be really careful of that. And so we go through an entire process of qualification that has the applicant fill out a worksheet and provide us with bank statements so that we can track things like payment of utilities and payment for food and the regular expenses of living.
Right, right. I just, because I could see that happening as a,
yeah.
as a kind of a scam.
Well,
I hate to say that, but I could see it happening, and it hurts the taxpayers.
Yeah.
Who are being honest.
right. And so we presume, we trust and then we verify.
Okay.
Right, we start with a footing of trust, but we verify
Okay.
everything that is told to us by examining those bank statements.
So we do have a checking system in
do,
place.
yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Wilson?
One of the things I just thought about this earlier, is that we need to, it doesn't seem to be a process, this is a procedural process in the town that just, that says, oh, it's, June 1st or whatever, that's the date we've all agreed that this is gonna be looked at. And we're gonna look at it as, get a routine, so this happens, it just doesn't come up because of the real estate went up all of a sudden, but we look at this every year. And I think that there's more and more seniors in town, and that more and more attention needs to be paid to this, but if we had a policy or procedure in the operations that said we do this every year, we're gonna do it on this date, and we're gonna have this information available at that period of time to do it, and so on. Because, like, for example, we went back, we made the changes in the how much the exemptions were gonna be last fall, which was good, and it was calculated based on the 179 odd people, or whatever, that was, being done. But at the same time, we just let this other issue of the income and the asset levels and so on slide. Now, we're here today trying to figure out how to do that. And I'm very sympathetic to the problem of how difficult it is to deal with these asset levels and so on, try to process. But that being said, we seem to be somewhat, other towns are coping with that because they've got significantly higher numbers in, than we have. But I think more time on everything that's associated with seniors in general has got to be more standardized, so this stuff comes up in the system, just like your budgeting process, automatic. You're dealing with this, to try to get ahead of it. The other thing that I was, in terms of these income levels that you have to, if you say make a change now, you have to consider that you don't want to, of the 193 people, I guess it is, 192 people, you have to take into consideration that they're going to get a fairly middle, I think they're talking like 8 or 9% increase possibly in Social Security income. So you don't want to set something now and then have a whole bunch of people fall off the register because of the Social Security increases. Stuff like that, but to be thinking about that before we have it, but get something in place so we're checking this and doing something about it on a regular basis.
Yes, thank you. All very good points. I think what we're probably going to see going forward is we're going to adopt this in as part of our budgeting process, since it's something that's we've learned through the veteran exemption is it's something that we need to be proactive about. But very good points. Thank you.
Do you have to have, I wonder if we have to have a income broken down into two pieces? Is that actually written in the RSA that you have to do that, or can you simply have?
So I have the gentleman here who can answer that.
What?
I have the gentleman here who can answer that.
Well, and so there has to be a separate category for married and for single, but there's nothing that requires them to be different amounts. So you could have the same dollar amount for either one, but the categories are defined in statute.
So the statute says we have to divide them, but we're in control of the number.
So
You can turn the radio up a little bit louder, or you can change the
So
station.
the situation that the person is married and now widowed, but still getting the pension of the husband, that's, has to go to the single income limit, that would help them, right? If we just made it all married income limit.
So,
Well, depending on what you make the number.
Yeah.
right.
No, but I'm saying, in our situation, the person's unfortunately getting the person's pension. Of course, it's beautiful they're getting the person's pension,
Right.
but it hurts them in this situation by about a couple $1,000s.
So what I
Because
what
they're
I would-
single now because the person's passed away. You get why that's a problem?
All things we can look at when we go into budgets.
And I would urge that caution about the thought that a significant increase in the qualification for the single, which is what that would be a large increase. As I talked about the unintended consequences, we don't know what kind of increase in the number of people who would qualify might be for that kind of an act. So
In
I
other words,
just
it's a
urge,
slippery slope.
it's a slippery slope, but I say the watchword is deliberate and cautious.
Understood? Okay.
One more thing and I'll stop.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, proceed.
One of the things that you ought to keep in mind about doing this is that seniors need the help. There's no question about that. A lot of seniors in town need help. But every time a senior says, I had enough, I can't afford it, or whatever, and they sell their house, everybody else pays. Because the cost, somebody that moves into that house is gonna have 2.1 kids. And right now, I think, although this is probably exaggeration, I use this number, right now it costs us, according to the school district's numbers, $18,000 per student per year to educate a child. Now, even if you cut that in half, there's not a senior in town that's paying that much money in taxes to pay one kid. I mean, so every time we lose a senior, everybody, the rest of the people pay, because they're gonna have to add 2 more kids to the school roll. So it.
Those darn schools.
It pays if you can figure out a way to do it, to be generous.
I understand.
If they paid no tax, if they had paid no tax at all, and they kept that darn house, it would be, tax situation would be better than having 2 kids in it.
Understood. So, well, thank you. So, folks, what everyone needs to understand is it takes about $120 million to run the town. So it's a balancing act, and we have to budget for it. And at the end of the day, somebody's gonna pay, because we have to raise $120 million to run the town, the schools, and the library. So I take Mr. Hamilton's, comments with the understanding of is that we need to proceed cautiously, but proceed. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
would you indulge me a few minutes to talk about the abatements in the Forest Hill?
Of course. I
Condominium
just signed it, so
Association?
sure.
I
It was quite the document.
Quite a few, and that was very happy to sign them.
So there were a total of 38 people who applied for an abatement, and we looked very carefully at the entire condominium. We've made a lot of changes in the values, and there were some significant abatements that will come through. There was a total reduction from the abatements of a little under $1.6 million in assessed value. And that comes up to about $29,244 refunded taxes to those taxpayers. The distribution of the changes was pretty balanced in terms of the number of people who got very small abatements and some got very large abatements. There were some unique characteristics of these properties that did not convert correctly in the CAMA conversion from 2019 to the new system. And it really impacted dramatically the units that had garages that were underneath living areas. So there were people who received up to, I think the highest refund will be $3,054 dollars and 76 cents plus interest. So
I think I saw like one valuation, a high one was like 156 and the low was around 10 or 15. That was about the range I saw when I signed the doc.
Taking the one that wasn't qualified because they did a lot of additions, right?
so there was one didn't meet it
they
because
put a lot
we
of-
inspected as many of these as we could, and there were a few changes, and so there was a neutral impact on the value of the property, but no abatement that was warranted based on the changes.
Understood?
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who wanted to talk about abatements? Ma'am, I just need your name and address. I'm not gonna make you get up, but just give me your name and address.
Maureen Comfort from Forest Hills, 14 St. Andrews Way.
Thank you, Maureen.
Wanted to know how many people filed for an abatement?
38.
38 people? That really surprises me that it was so few.
Out of 60, what, 60-something?
You'll be getting a letter from us. I have a spreadsheet that will show you if you're interested.
So we just approved them all tonight.
Just
Because the
approved them
council has
just
to
now.
approve the abatements, and we just signed them
You
tonight.
just signed off on all of them.
So
tonight.
now they can go forward with them.
Now I can tell you about it. If you want to give me a.
All right, let's do it.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
I have a question. I have a question.
Certainly, sir.
My name is Bruce Burgess. And the question, I live in
Bruce-
8 Sanders Way. The question is, we got a new tax bill, and it's based on the same assessment that's been challenged. And I understand the process. But my feeling was is the abatement should have been resolved in time so that on May 15th, when you sent the information to the taxes, that they had the correct abatement. And the state policy of guidelines for reference menu for selecting assessors and taxpayers does say that on April 1st, assessing officials shall adjust assessments to reflect changes so that all assessments are reasonably proportional within the municipality. So if they had been adjusted on April 1st, on May 15th, the tax bills ought to come out with the correct assessment. And it would save us the hassle of worrying about what goes on next year, or it would save the town the hassle of following this all through. So the date in which assessments are being completed is not in line with the state guidelines.
So I'm gonna let him answer, but Mr. Burgess, so the way the process works is that they bring the abatements to us, and then we have to approve them. If the assessor wants to handle something in a one-off or something, or work with individuals on something along those lines, that's within his purview. But I will let him answer.
And Mr. Burgess, the changes that you reference in what is basically a handbook, that's not the law, it's just a handbook.
It is what I'm referring to as the procedures we follow, though we're going to act.
Okay, well, I'm gonna let him answer, and I'm happy to let you
Thank
speak again, but I'm gonna let him answer, and we can have that conversation.
April 1st is the date of taxation, and the changes of which he speaks and the reference manual refers to are physical changes. They're subdivisions, they're additions, they're deletions. I tore down my shed, or I don't have a pool anymore, and so those kinds of physical changes. We do try to make sure that we get abatements in to correct values. You've already signed a great number of them.
I think we signed about 100 tonight.
Some of them came through before the tax warrant had to be created in the middle of May. Some of them didn't make it through. I was still inspecting properties in Forest Hills, to be fair to all the people who asked me to, as late as 3 weeks ago. So the timing of it just unfortunately didn't work. The good news is that the June bill is a prepayment. So it's not technically a tax bill, it's a down payment on what the final tax bill will be in December. So it's a credit against the account. And whatever amount might have been overpaid relative to the total value for 2022 will be reflected in a lower December bill.
But isn't it true that they have to now apply for another abatement?
No,
Okay.
Not at all.
So you'll be able to walk Mr. Burgess through that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm happy to talk with him anytime.
Excellent,
I
good.
understand completely. I'm just saying that every time I've asked questions about what our town procedure is, I'm referred to the state procedures. I'm looking at the state procedure, and it says that these assessments should have been completed on April 1st, and I'm gonna leave it at that, because I don't wanna make a fight for everybody.
So, Mr. Burgess, I've asked the assessor, the council has asked the assessor to work with you so that your bill is reflected correctly on December 1st. And I'm sorry that they were late, but we've asked them to work with you to make sure it's reflected correctly. Is that okay?
I think the town should be doing what they say they should be doing,
And-
and it would save you a lot of trouble
Ms.
if it was done, and you didn't have to deal with it a second half in the next, that's all.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just applaud Mr. Hamilton for his efforts on this project. He worked not only speedily, but as we've communicated to residents who've asked us, he's complied with the law in all respects. And I get the frustration, but I do want to applaud Steve for his efforts.
Thank you. I'm happy to see that Forest Hills is moving forward. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, folks, we're moving on to the next item. I have a ordinance 2022-06, first reading, animal control ordinance. Can I accept a motion to,
John, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
I can't figure out which changed. Is it section 11? Like, you know how, like, it's a change, right? Because it's an existing ordinance?
I can speak to that. I mean, it's a
It's
little bit
not
of an
on here.
involved discussion, but
well, it's a first reading, so
Yeah,
I don't want
I
to
didn't
do it,
expect
I
to-
don't want
right.
to do it
I
tonight.
just, usually it has like,
Usually it's in red or something.
yeah, so I don't know what was changed.
the red
or
line
added.
turned out to be a mess based on a number of different people who had input into it. I will get you a red line that's cleaned up that you'll be able to follow, but more importantly, I'm happy to talk to you this week about
Yeah,
the changes.
No, I don't want to waste it, as long as I know it's, that
No
I
waste.
can look at the
Yeah.
old one to the new one.
Yeah. Yep.
That's all.
I'll accept the motion to waive first reading.
So moved.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes affirmative. Our next council meeting is on July 11th at 7 o'clock. We are moving to summer schedule, so that will be our only meeting in July. Next item, presentation of strategic goals. So first of all, thank you for getting these together and getting these to us before the fiscal year starts, July 1st. And we look forward to your presentation.
Mr. Chairman, earlier this year, the town council requested to hear from department heads about their strategic goals. And in the course of going through this process, the assistant town manager and I have sort of taken the reins in order to make hard judgments about which goals really should rise to the level of the council, require significant support by the council and the public, and that's what we present to you tonight. I want to emphasize that this is not a document or a presentation that is set in stone. Goals change, circumstances change, and I think as an example is the first goal that I'll talk about tonight. I don't think a few years ago anybody probably would have expected that water infrastructure would have been the first goal that I would present to you tonight, but it is. And so we're here for the council's input on where we should spend our time and resources, and we welcome that input tonight. The first goal that we have is water infrastructure. We have a PFAS problem here in town. That isn't a surprise to anybody. But more importantly, we have a water availability issue, and PFAS isn't the only contaminant that we need to be worried about. And so we have been working with DES for years now at this point to try to sketch out what improvements to this existing infrastructure might look like. And DES has funded a lot of that work, and we are getting to the point where we're going to be funding some of that work based on the voters' approval of a warrant article in March to support some of that work. What DES has communicated to us is that there are two phases to the build-out of a townwide water system. Phase one would bring the supply into Londonderry down High Range Road and would potentially be and would allow residences along High Range Road to hook into that supply. I don't want to shock anybody, but the price tag that DES has given us is between $50 and $55 million. There was a proposal to use state budget surplus to cover some of that in the first instance. My understanding is the budget surplus was applied for another purpose. However, we're still working with our representatives in Concord to try to get a significant portion of that $55 million restored.
So the $55 million that I think we heard from the speaker and from the president of the Senate, and from DES, it was being earmarked for Londonderry, has been spent elsewhere.
Correct.
Okay.
So there are a couple of other things, pieces of this funding puzzle that I'll mention, but let me just preview for you Phase 2. Phase 2 would build out this system into neighborhoods townwide, and it is frankly a massive undertaking. It would require interconnecting with a water system in Litchfield. It would require additional mains to be installed, all with a price tag of approximately $150 million. By orders of magnitude, this would be the largest capital project ever undertaken in Londonderry. And so I think it's important to note that there are a couple of different potential pieces to this funding puzzle. One is the state, DES, and their grants. The other is the infusion of this kind of once-in-a-lifetime federal funding for infrastructure projects and for PFAS remediation projects. And then lastly, there's Saint-Gobain. Because High Range Road is on the edge of the consent decree, Saint-Gobain is anticipated to be participating in the payment of Phase 1. Obviously, this is something that is going to require council and taxpayer support. The important thing to note for tonight's purposes is this discussion really still is in its infancy. One of the most important things that we need to learn from DES is what Londonderry's share of either Phase 1 or Phase 2 might be. Because right now, it's just conceptual. I can't go to the voters and say, I've got a water system I'd like to sell you, but I don't know how much it's going to cost. But I do want to just give everybody a sense of the kind of project that we're talking about here. In March, the voters, by a pretty significant margin, expressed their support for looking at ways to tackle this issue. Granted, they were not voting on something like this, but there is pretty extensive support and concern out there on these issues, and so that is why it is first on our list, as well as based on feedback we've gotten from the council along the way about how important it is to get this issue right. Issue number 2, or goal number 2, is the DPW facility. I think all of you have taken site walks down there. I believe the budget committee did the same. The DPW facility, to call it where these first responders do their work substandard, really isn't capturing the state of affairs down there. If you haven't gone down there and seen the facility, I suggest that you do. And I'm sure Mr. Wally would be happy to extend that invitation to others in the public who might want to see the state of that facility. It is true that the quarters where they take their meals and have their lockers was recently upgraded. But that is not where they do their work. And there are a number of health and safety improvements that have to be made, as well as improvements that frankly have become industry standards, such as the indoor storage of equipment. Some of these trucks cost $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and they're being stored out in the cold and heat, and it's not good for those vehicles in their life cycle. The third goal that we have for you tonight is economic development, and under that heading, the first sub-goal is pass construction and rehabilitation tax exemption. I guess we can cross that one off of our lists. The second is South Londonderry sewer capacity. At the present time, we're sending all of our wastewater flowage in South Londonderry to the Derry plant under an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Derry. We don't have more than 500 gallons per day of flow that we can send to Derry. And at full build-out, the Route 102 corridor and other areas of South Londonderry are expected to demand 1 million gallons per day of flow. Clearly, developing the rest of that area in an orderly way and in a way that protects our natural resources and gives us the best ability to control that growth is paramount. The solution is to send a lot of that waste to the Manchester wastewater treatment plant. Manchester can essentially take an unlimited amount of sewer flowage, and unfortunately, it won't be cheap to get it up there. It will require construction of a sewer pump station and about 7,500 linear feet of sewer force main and 1,900 feet of gravity sewer in order to get there. The good news is that there are also, as with the water situation, potentially multiple pieces to the funding puzzle. I'm happy to report that the town staff and I have pursued funding in every quarter. We have received the support of Congressman Pappas's office, as well as Senator Shaheen's office, for a $5 million award to support this project. That needs to work its way through the House and Senate Appropriations Committee, but that would defray a huge portion, if not all, of that project. It's vital to economic development in this area. Widen Pettingill Road. Pettingill Road was designed to be a 4-lane road, but the traffic and the demand wasn't there when the road was initially put in. And so the road bed and the drainage structures were put in to accommodate a 4-lane road at some point in the future. Based on consultations with DOT, the time to widen Pettingill Road is drawing close. The project obviously will add 2 lanes of pavement to Pettingill Road and open up the remaining parcels in that area to the large-scale development that we're looking to confine to that area. Again, I have good news for you. We pursued federal funding for this project, and Senator Shaheen has offered her support with a $4.3 million initial support. That, again, needs to work its way through the Senate Appropriations Committee, but that would go a long way towards getting that situation resolved. Again, this is vital to the full build-out of the Pettingill Road area. Lastly, I offer you as a goal under the economic development heading, review and improve planning board site plan and subdivision regulations. It's been a while since we've taken a comprehensive look at our subdivision and site plan regulations. We want to make sure that they are appropriately striking a balance between controlled growth and responsible growth, but also that they're not putting up unnecessary roadblocks or barriers to development. We think that there may be opportunities to tweak those regulations and to ensure that they are in keeping with best practices and current standards. Could be that some of those need to be, the restrictiveness of some of those provisions needs to be increased. It could be that the restrictiveness of some of them needs to be decreased. We just need to take a look, which is a large undertaking, to make sure that they're serving the town and its goals in 2022. And lastly, improve standardization and financial oversight. This is an area where the finance director and I and the assistant town manager devote significant attention and resources. And it's somewhere where we think we need to spend a lot of our time and resources for the benefit of the town and the taxpayers. As an example, given the complex codes for details and shifts and grants that exist at the police and fire departments, The police and fire departments are not integrated into the town's central online payroll system. And so we are working to determine whether that can be achieved. We think it's a worthy goal because it gives standardization across all town departments, and we think it's important for oversight as well. I would also point to some of the other measures that we've taken as examples of where we think resources and time should be devoted, where our goals should be headed. Identifying potentially unnecessary spending. For example, telephone lines that are not being used that we can cancel. Vehicle idling time. In a time of $5 gas, we want to make sure that vehicles aren't being left idling unnecessarily. We want to put, and we have put, more of our acquisitions out to bid than ever before. And I can tell you it's already saving the taxpayers money. We want to continue to do that and also just increase the visibility around that. We've gotten the bids up on the town website. We've gotten some of the notification functions sorted out. We think that's important because I do think that hearing from taxpayers about their concerns does lead to better decisions at the town hall level in terms of spending. And so we want to hear that input. And lastly, we want to continue to strictly enforce the purchasing policy. This is something that the finance director and I feel pretty strongly about because, again, I think not only in theory but in practice, these are things that save the taxpayers money. And lastly, I'll note that we have a number of different goals, Mr. Chairman, that are personnel related. They are not appropriate for discussion here tonight, but they are ideas about efficiencies and improving operations, and they are areas where the assistant town manager and I will be spending a lot of our time as well. And so I just want to make sure that that is not lost in all of this.
So I would ask that the council review this document, come back on July 11th with some detailed questions. If there's questions you have ahead of time that you feel of a sensitive nature, email them to the town manager. Copy the council. There's no secrets. Any questions we can ask can be in the public, but get those over to you, and we'll go back and take a look at this again on July 11th because this is our first pass.
Well, can I just ask him something right now?
Of course.
All right, so on the water part of it, I would suggest looking at what Merrimack did. They put that out there to the people did it, and really, they're the ones who ate up most of the money, because then they went back to the funding commission, which I sit on, and asked for that money basically back because they had the plans, and it's really, really necessary to have a water plan, and I know we're waiting for the money part of it, but we really need a process part of the water plan done. In other words, take money out of the picture, pretend money's not an issue. Where are we gonna start? What do we need? What would the phases look like? Where is it gonna go? That all needs to be done, and it should be done kind of on a congruent line with our sewer, because in a weird way, they're, road ripping up if we know that sewer is going to be going there. But those two plans, but without the money, I know the money part of it is important, but are really, really important when you're presenting to that commission. If when we move forward, and to have it done is really going to help us move up higher on the list.
I think those comments are excellent. I will tell the council and the public that just last week or the week before, we had a meeting involving the DES commissioner, involving DES staff, and I believe that the town staff and the DES staff are there is a consensus as far as how to roll this project out for consideration, specifically how to phase it. And I expect in the very near term, we're going to be ready to talk about that publicly.
Great. That's good to hear, because the sooner the better before funds really, really, really do disappear.
Yeah, so be prepared to bring that back on our agenda for July 11th, and we'll get a little deeper into the details of this.
Certainly.
Okay, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes for June 6th as presented in our packet.
So moved.
Jim?
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes affirmative. Wasn't here. I know, motion carries. Liaison reports, anything new to report? Yes?
Okay, so I had a ZBA meeting. I asked them, you know, what they would like us to look at. And again, signs came up. I explained to them, in lieu of finding a town planner, we're gonna put that on the back burner. But they understood, but they do think that that is a really big issue that we should be looking at. The other thing is I had an energy meeting. We're making some strides. Probably by the end of September, beginning October, we will be presenting. We will be getting put on the CIP. And to Heritage, we had some presenters there that was very interesting. I didn't realize that we had signed an agreement for 5 years with an aggregate that's already in place, and we've been doing it for 2 years, even though nothing's moved ahead up at the PCU, up at the government, to do anything. So we have 3 more years with this other company. That being said, we're working with the schools, and there may be some ways to save even more money through energy. They're willing to talk about putting solar panels on their roof. And they're just finished their, it was Alan who was telling us about it, but their facilities study, and some roofs need to be replaced, as well as some heating things like burners and whatever. And it couldn't come at a better time because there is funding for solar, and they could convert the oil and gas heat to solar, which would make them kind of net zero by putting these panels on the roof. And Alan told us that in 10 years, they saved almost, was it 8 million? Am I right, Bob? Yep. Okay, it was $8 million in 10 years on the small things that they did with solar. And Alan is working with Dave for the brain master maintenance kind of thing, so that we have the same program and the same company. And so it's more interactive, and we would know what was going on in each building. If there's an issue, we can react very quickly to it. So these things may sound small, but when you add up all of our electric bills, all of our heating bills, all of our oil bills, it comes to a lot of money, as well as the maintenance of all the HVAC, which if we can convert everything and pay for it through the energy we produce, would be saving a lot of money every year, considering that Eversource is gonna jump up another, 50% or something like that. So the group is moving forward. It's kind of exciting to see the school and town working together on a project for the better good of the community. So the next 2 meetings that we have will be workshops, putting our presentation together for you guys and for the school board to hopefully move it forward. So, thank you.
Anything liaisons? Old Home Days, right around the corner. Need volunteers. Volunteers, volunteers, volunteers. As just mentioned, Eversource is jumping up from 10, 11 cents to 22 cents. We need to be able to look at our welfare system between the heating and the electricity. We're gonna have to look at that. I got off a flight and ran into Captain O'Donoghue, and I got a briefing on the airport that was unscheduled, and I didn't know I was going to get, but it was very interesting about his transition to the airport and all the different things there. I was in touch with the airport director. They're going to be, I don't know if they're bringing it back, but someone had asked me about the autism program that Logan does, and I guess we used to do it in Manchester to help these children with being able to learn how to get on a plane and all the different processes and everything. So I'm still waiting to hear on that. To see whether they're bringing that back here in Manchester. It was suspended during COVID. Next item, town manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep this brief tonight. I just wanted to go over some community events that I attended this past 2 weeks. The fire chief and I were privileged, and Councilor Paul was actually there as well, to attend the grand opening of Enterprise Bank at Woodmont Commons. That was a nice event, very, very well attended. I also attended an event to honor some of our first responders, but also some community members, lacrosse coaches, who were quick thinking and were able to save the life of a coach who had a medical incident. That was a nice event to attend down at South School. And I got to meet for the first time the incoming interim superintendent. We had a nice introductory meeting, and I look forward to working with him productively in going forward. Couple of things. I guess the only other thing I would highlight, a couple of things I would highlight. One is we added a human services tab to the website. So this has a lot of information, some of which kind of is pertinent to that comment you just made, Mr. Chairman, about where to find assistance in town if you should need it. Check that out. We're happy to hear the public's or the council's feedback on that, but I think that's something that we're trying to do to make that information a little bit more accessible. Lastly, it's political season, as everybody knows. And so I've seen some stuff on social media, but I've also been asked questions about how are political signs being handled out on the Max parcel. Obviously, that's been an area where signs have appeared for years. The difference is that with the closing last year, the town is now the owner of that front 5 acres. The town's policy is this. In 2020, I wrote a memorandum to Chief Hart that was put out on social media saying that the town generally tolerates signs in its right-of-way or on its property, provided there isn't a health or a safety or traffic hazard that's created. It should be noted, as I said, that area has been a receptacle for political signs for years. And I actually think it's beneficial because it draws those signs away from other areas where they may pose more of a line of sight issue. The town does not get involved in deciding whose sign can go there and whose sign cannot go there. That would be a big problem. And so it's this hands-off approach that has existed since at least 2020, but my understanding is going much farther back than that, that the town intends to adopt with respect to that parcel.
Quick question. What is the time frame? So can somebody who's running, is election, they have the primary, when can they start? I mean, can it stay now all through Old Home Day? Or is there a period of time, like 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before? And what is the time that they have to take those signs down?
There is a law about how long they can.
I really think that needs to be put out there.
Otherwise, it's up to the moderator.
Yeah, so I don't have the answer offhand, but I'm certainly happy to research that
I just
for
think
you.
it's important because
Yeah, it's always been the moderator's call, but they do have to come down, I think, is it 2 weeks afterwards?
Yes, is
But
my
I think,
understanding.
I thought there was a time period that they had to wait to put them up too.
And usually the moderator sets that time.
I mean, on private property, you can put them up whenever you want, but
Right. Now, the one thing about the signs is that if you are a candidate, be respectful. Go ask people's permission. And see if it's okay with them and everything. The other thing is we may not have a hard and fast rule about the town common, but it has been frowned on for many years not to put your sign on the town common.
That's the directive that I've given to town staff.
It's just, it's the town common, it's the town, it's where all the people go. And like I said, it's been frowned on for many years, and hopefully people will respect that. And if they don't, then we'll pick them up for them and they can pick them up.
Correct.
Lisa.
Just very briefly, Mr. Chair, Leadership Londonderry applications, we're still accepting them until July 8th. They're right on the front page of the website. There's a link. And then the second thing is, believe it or not, part of Londonderry is now in abnormally dry conditions. Not a drought yet, but we're starting. I'm checking the drought map every Thursday when it
We've
comes
gotten
out.
an awful lot of rate.
I know. So maybe that will help next week. But just a reminder to everybody to, keep that in mind when you're watering your lawns.
or burning.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Anything else? Accept a motion to adjourn,
So moved, Chairman.
unless you want to stay. Our next meeting is on July 11th at 7 p.m. in this room. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
All right.
Chair votes affirmative. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.